Under Unit 3, our discussion is going to be on the topics around derivatives and what are key derivatives like futures and options and how they are useful in the world of finance. So primarily this will cover a few topics such as introductions to futures and forwards, usage of futures for hedging, principles of pricing of futures and arbitrage around that, basics of instruments like options, key properties of options, option pricing, and then eventually all of this and some sort of an understanding on how these instruments become useful in the financial management domain as such, right? It's good to understand some of these at this point of time because they will form the crux of the way some companies manage their finances or raise money at various points of time. Also useful in terms of hedging of the risks that companies face in a lot of the market. So it's important for us to understand how some of these work and what are the distinctions between something like a forward, a future, an option, or something else, and then try and see whether this fits into the overall framework of financial management when a firm goes around that, right? So we'll begin with the first part of this, which will discuss about primarily forwards. Right, so this particular section is going to talk about forwards and how do they work. Just before we go to the forwards, let's understand what is a derivative. Uh, a derivative is essentially, as the name suggests, an instrument that derives its price from another underlying instrument or asset. Right. So if there is an asset whose price is moving, like let's say a stock, a derivative is basically something that derives its price from the stock price. Right. So the stock price moves in one way and then something else moves because of the price of the stock. And that's how derivative is there. The underlying asset can be immediately purchased or sold at the price called spot price. So whatever the underlying asset is, the underlying asset could be stock, it could be a commodity like cotton, it could be gold, it could be anything. And if you're purchasing this from the market, that is purchased at something known as the spot price, right? Spot price or the underlying price is what eventually guides or determines what is going to be the price of the derivative, and that's why it is called as a derivative, because it derives its pricing from the underlying asset, right? They usually have defined lives, and we will discuss more about this as well, that it could be a month, it could be 2 months. Usually there is a contract period, right? And we'll discuss again as we look at various kinds of derivatives, we'll look at the specifications. And they're also usually zero sum contracts. Now, this we will pick up in more detail at a later stage, and we'll understand what is a zero sum contract towards the end of this particular section, right? We'll leave it at this here. There are various types of derivatives, namely forwards, futures, options, and something called as swaps. Right now, for practical purposes, what is going to be important is forwards and futures. The discussion is going to be largely similar. There's a small distinction between the two as we go along and discuss about it. Options are interesting instruments which come later, and we'll discuss about them in subsequent sessions during this unit. Swaps may be touched upon very, in a very small manner at this point of time, because we don't really get to use too much of those in basic financial management. When we reach advanced stages in the understanding of finance, that's when swaps will become important for us as well, right? So let's first build the premise around what is a forward and how do we really understand the functionality of how a forward works, right? So let's understand the basic construct of a forward. It is an instrument that a participant uses to fix a future price for a particular transaction, right? So the transaction has to happen in the future. You're trying to fix the price today. So what's happening is you are fixing the price today for a future transaction. It's like saying after 2 months, I will buy something from you at a certain price. That's what is a forward agreement, right? That's what is a forward agreement as it is called. Now, to understand this better, we'll take the example of the commodities market. Consider that there is a farmer who wants to sell his rice produce 2 months from now, right? And he wants to sell it at rupees 90 per kg. He worries that the price could fall in this period. right? So he's not sure what will happen after 2 months. We are standing here at t is equals to 0, and he has to sell it after 1 month, and he has to sell it after 2 months, right? So now between this period, what will happen to the price of rice is not known, right? So the farmer worries that the price of rice will fall. So the farmer tries to find a buyer who needs rice after 2 months. So you obviously need a counterparty who can get into an agreement with you. He tries and finds a buyer uh, who needs rice after 2 months. Now think about it. What is the worry of the farmer? The farmer believes that the price can fall, and that is a problem because then he'll be able to sell at a lower price. What is the worry for the buyer? The buyer worries that the price might go up, right? So if I am the farmer and I believe that the prices can go down, but you are a buyer and you believe that the prices can go up, then both of us can actually fix the price at 90 rupees and both of us would be happy, right? You think it could go higher than 90, so you want to remove your risk from the entire equation. I think it can go below 90, so I want to remove my risk from the equation. What do? We get into an agreement. And the agreement is that the buyer will buy rice from the farmer after 2 months. The buyer agrees to buy it at rupees 90 per kg 2 months from now. So from 2 months from now, uh, the buyer says, I will buy the rice from you at rupees 90 per kg, right? So they have entered into an agreement. This agreement is nothing but what is like a forward contract, right? So far, what we have seen is that basically there has just been an agreement between two parties. We will keep removing the assumptions from this and keep complicating the case as we go along. The first case is when there is an agreement, right? 2 months down the line, what happens to the price of rice and how does that dominate what happens to this agreement? Let's look at the structure of what happens after 2 months. Now, case one is, let's say the price of rice falls to 85 per kg, right? Now, if the price falls to 85 per kg, who is proven right? The farmer felt that the price will fall. The buyer said the price will go up. So the farmer felt that the price will go down. The buyer was worried that the price could go up. Who was proven right? The farmer. So technically, who benefits here if you think about it? If there was no contract, the farmer would have sold at this price. In the case of no contract, farmer would have sold at 85. But now there is a contract. If there is a contract, the farmer will be able to sell it at 90, which means the farmer actually gains 5 more than what he would have if there was no contract, right? And if there was no contract, what would have happened to the buyer? The buyer would have bought at 85. So the buyer is actually paying more because he's in a contract. So technically the buyer sees a notional kind of a loss of 5. It's actually a loss of 5 because if there was no contract, the buyer would have bought it at 85. But obviously they wanted to de-risk themselves. No one knows what will happen in the future. So you have to take a call today and you decided that you will go and buy it at 90. That's fine. That's life. Someone will be right, someone will be wrong. But if the price goes to 85 per kg, the farmer sort of wins and the buyer loses. The farmer gains and the buyer loses, right? Let's think of it the other way around. What happens if the price of rice is 95 per kg? Again, in the case of no contract, the farmer would have sold at 95 and buyer would have bought at 95. Now the buyer gets to buy at 90 instead of 95, which is the price in the market. So effectively the buyer stands to gain 5, right? And if you look at the farmer, if there was no contract, could have sold it today in the market at 95 per kg. but the farmer will have to sell it at 90 because there is a contract here. So either ways, whatever happens, one party will win, the other party will lose, right? So whatever happens, one party is going to win this, one party is going to lose this. And however, what is happening is both the parties are basically looking at de-risking themselves. So they want a fixed price. In other words, they do not want any volatility. They don't want any volatility. So no volatility is why they are entering into this forward contract that 2 months from now, the buyer will buy this produce from the farmer at rupees 90 per kg, right? Now let's go ahead and try and complicate this case a little bit, right? So the first things we come to know is that in our initial case, if the market price of rice is 85 per kg, the farmer has gained from the transaction. If the price of rice is 95 per kg, the buyer has gained from the transaction, right? So you only gain from the transaction when your view materializes, right? So what was your view? The farmer's view was that the prices will fall. If that happened, which is in this case, the farmer gains from the transaction. The buyer's view was that the prices will go up. So if that happens, then the buyer gains from the transaction. Correct? So if what your view is plays out in the market, that is when you make money in the market, right? So that's the broad premise of how this works. Let's complicate it a little bit. Let us assume that the farmer and buyer are in different geographies. If the farmer and buyer are in different geographies, then logistically, it is not possible for the buyer to buy rice from the farmer because the transaction and shipping cost will add significantly, right? You can't buy 1 kg at 90 rupees if you're in different geographies. Let's say they are in different countries altogether. If they are in different countries, then what do? Right? So from that perspective, now there is a problem because they still have that viewpoint. The farmer believes prices may fall and the buyer believes that the prices may rise, and that's their worry. So what do? They are in different geographies. So what they do is they might be in different geographies and they will eventually buy and sell in their own geography. They will buy and sell in their own country, own vicinity, own geography, but they still found each other. So they connect with each other. And what do they do after connecting? They just get into a bet. What if they just enter into a bet with each other about the price of rice? Now, what's the farmer saying? The farmer is saying the price will fall below 90. The buyer is saying the price will go above 90. Remember, that was their view. So the farmer says the price will go below 90. The buyer says it will go above 90. They get into this bet about the price of rice and they fix the decision point as 90. What does that mean? If price is less than 90, then the farmer wins. If price is greater than 90, then the buyer wins the bet, right? And what happens in terms of winning? The party that loses the bet. So if the farmer wins, the buyer will lose. The party that loses the bet will pay the difference to the party that wins the bet, right? So whoever wins gets the money from the other party. And how much do they get? They get the difference to 90. So if the price is 97, who wins the bet? The buyer wins the bet. How much does the buyer get? 97 minus 90, 7. And how much does the farmer pay? 7. Right? So the farmer will pay what the buyer wins in this case, correct? So let's look at the cases now. Now let's look at two cases again. What happens if rice prices go to 85 and what happens if they go to 95? Let's take the first case first. Price goes to 85. Right now, farmer goes to own market and sells at 85. Correct? So the farmer gets plus 85 for selling the rice. right? Similarly, the buyer will go to his own market, wherever that is. The buyer will go to his own market and buy at 85, which means the buyer pays minus 85. But what happens between the bet? Who wins the bet now? So which is the party that wins the bet? The bet is won by the farmer. The farmer wins the bet, which means the payment has to happen from the buyer to the farmer. And how much is the payment? The price goes to 85. So the difference 90 minus 85 is to be paid, which means 5 rupees would be paid by the buyer to the farmer. Now the payment can happen through banks. You don't really need to be in the same geography. So what does that mean? This is because of rice and this is because of the bet. What is the total inflow for the farmer? Plus 90. The farmer makes 90. See? And what is the total outflow for the buyer? 85 is paid to buy the rice and minus 5 is paid because this guy lost the bet. So what was the total payout? 90. So whatever they do, they still ended up paying, this guy ended up paying 90 and this guy ended up getting 90, right? That's the first case where the price went to 85. Now in this case, they are not transacting with each other. They just got into a contract around a bet, around the price of rice with each other, right? Let's see what happens if the price goes to 95. Now the farmer in his own market goes and sells at 95, which means the farmer gains 95 on account of rice. The buyer buys at 95, which means the buyer pays 95 to someone in his market. So this market is here and that market is there, right? There are different markets where they're trading. Who wins the bet now? The price is 95, so the buyer wins the bet. So this guy is the winner of the bet this time. And because this guy is the winner, there is going to be a payment from the farmer to the buyer. What is that payment going to be? That's going to be 5, right? Because you're doing a 95 minus 90, and who wins the bet? The buyer wins the bet, so he gets 5 there, right? So on account of the bet, the farmer actually pays 5, right? Loses the bet and hence pays 5. And this guy makes 5 because he wins the bet, right? 5 rupees have gone from the farmer to the buyer. What is the net outflow and inflow? The farmer gets 90, the buyer pays 90. So just like our first situation, in this case, what they did was eventually they were able to fix the price for the transaction of rice. Just that instead of having one single transaction where one party was selling the rice and another was buying the rice, in this case they are selling and buying at what the market price is. But because they have gotten into a contract or a bet with each other, the final price again gets fixed at 90, which is what we did earlier. When they were into a contract here, they were in a contract here, they had basically fixed the price at 90, right? That's exactly what happened even when they got into a bet. The price, whether the farmer won the bet, was 90, or I shouldn't say the price was 90, but 90 was what the farmer made and 90 was what the buyer paid. And when the buyer won the bet, even then the flow was 90. 90 was what the farmer got and 90 was what the buyer paid to get access to the cotton that they need, through the rice that they needed, right? So effectively, just by entering in a bet, they have ensured that they will be able to kind of get the same transaction value as they were getting earlier if they were in a contract. So even if the contract does not happen and they just get into some sort of a financial transaction or a contract in terms of a bet, the same feature as a forward plays out here, right? So let's summarize. Forwards are contracts created for fixing a transaction price for a future in the future for any asset, and are in effect like creating bets on the price of the contract. right? Since they are bets, they act like zero-sum games. Remember we said what is a zero-sum game? If you see here, the buyer gets 5, which is what the farmer loses. And if you see here, the farmer gets 5, which is what the buyer loses. So what is a zero-sum game? One party wins and the other party loses an equal amount. In other words, a zero-sum game means that there is no money creation. Or let's put it this way, there is no new money creation. Money just changes hands and effectively changes hands from the loser, whoever loses, to the winner, whoever wins the bet. So effectively, all your derivative contracts are zero-sum games. Their final payoff will be very similar to what effectively a bet is, and that's exactly how a forward contract works. There are obviously more nuances on a forward contract, and there are risks that will come up now, which we will discuss at a subsequent point of time. But to keep things simple, you're trying to transact in the future. If you directly enter into a contract, that's like a forward. Even if you're not able to enter into a transaction contract, even if you enter a contract only, which is like a bet on the price of the instrument, that's like a forward contract. And they're always zero-sum games. So one party wins, the other has to lose and lose an equal amount, right? So if the price went to 112, the buyer would have won the bet. The buyer would have won 112 minus 90, which is equal to plus 22. But the buyer would have paid 112 in the market to buy the rice. So effectively, the buyer would have ended up paying 90. The farmer would have sold at 112 but would have lost the bet. So net inflow for the farmer would have been fixed at 90. So in a sense, they have fixed their inflow and outflow by entering into this contract. That's the primary use of the contract, in addition to the fact that it basically can also be done if you just want to put a bet somewhere, right? That's what a future contract is. In our next section, we're going to discuss about some of the risks that emanate out of a future contract.